Taehyung never meant to see it. He had only come back to Jungkook's hotel suite to return the cufflinks he borrowed for last night's rehearsal. Something small, something harmless. He even considered just leaving them at the front desk, but old habits died hard. Jungkook had always told him, "Just come in, you know the code." So he did. The suite was unusually quiet. Not the comfortable kind of silence, but the kind that pressed against the ears, thick and heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Outside, the Seoul skyline shimmered in soft dusk light, glass buildings reflecting gold and lavender hues. Inside, everything felt frozen. That was when Taehyung saw the folder. Ivory, thick paper, embossed edges. It lay half open on the coffee table, peeking out from beneath a sketchpad and a stack of production notes. At first, he thought it was another concept design, maybe for a photo shoot or a brand collaboration. But then he saw the words at the top. Wedding invitation draft. Taehyung's step slowed. His fingers hesitated in the air before finally touching the folder, as if it might burn him. He told himself not to look. He told himself this was none of his business, but curiosity wasn't what pulled the folder fully into view. It was instinct. The kind that came from knowing someone for too long. The kind that recognized when something important had been left unguarded. The names were printed in elegant gold script. Jungkook and Taehyung frowned. The second name was there, but not really. It was blurred. Not erased, not removed, not replaced. Blurred. Like someone had deliberately hidden it. Taehyung's chest tightened. Why is the bride's name blurred out? His voice came out softer than he expected, barely more than a whisper. The words sounded strange in the quiet room, as if they didn't belong there. He stared at the page, eyes scanning it again and again, hoping he had misunderstood. Hoping it was a design glitch, a placeholder, anything but what it looked like. But the blur was too intentional. Too precise. As if someone didn't want him to know. Or worse, as if someone knew he would look. Taehyung's grip on the folder tightened, just as footsteps echoed from the hallway. Jungkook appeared at the doorway, hair slightly messy, phone in hand, looking relaxed. Did you find the cufflinks? Then he saw the folder. And froze. The shift in his posture was subtle, but Taehyung noticed it instantly. The way his shoulders stiffened. The way his breath paused for half a second before he exhaled slowly. You weren't supposed to see that. The air between them felt smaller. Taehyung didn't look up. His eyes were still locked on the blurred name. Why is her name hidden? He asked quietly. Jungkook didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked further into the room, running a hand through his hair, avoiding Taehyung's gaze. It's complicated. Try me. Taehyung finally looked up. Not angry, not shouting, just confused. Jungkook sighed. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Taehyung's voice cracked slightly, not with rage but with something worse, disbelief. Jungkook turned toward the window, resting his hands on the glass as if he needed something solid to hold on to. There are things I haven't told you, things I didn't know how to say. So you decided to blur her name like it's a classified document. The words slipped out sharper than Taehyung intended. Jungkook flinched. This isn't a game, Taehyung continued. You're getting married. I never said it was a game, Jungkook replied, but the defense sounded weak even to himself. Taehyung stepped closer slowly. The space between them still carried years of shared memories, late-night conversations, inside jokes no one else understood, a bond built quietly, without labels, without explanations. But now that same silence felt dangerous. You're not just my friend Jungkook, Taehyung said. He stopped. The rest of the sentence refused to come out. Jungkook turned around, eyes guarded. She doesn't want her name public yet, she's private. Taehyung let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. You don't think I deserve to know? Jungkook didn't answer. And somehow, that silence hurt more than any lie. 1,000 small things suddenly clicked in Taehyung's mind. The missed calls, the half-truths, the way Jungkook had been distant for months, always tired, always busy, always somewhere else. I thought we told each other everything, Taehyung said. We used to, Jungkook replied almost inaudibly. The hurt bloomed slowly in Taehyung's chest, like a bruise spreading beneath porcelain. He swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. It's okay. Jungkook looked at him, surprised. People change. Taehyung gently placed the folder back on the table, as if it weighed more than paper. I hope the wedding is beautiful. He turned toward the door. Taehyung. Don't. He raised a hand without looking back. The door closed with a soft click. Outside, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white. Inside Taehyung's chest, something unraveled thread by thread. Not because Jungkook was getting married. Taehyung didn't realize he had walked all the way down to the lobby until the automatic doors slid open in front of him. Cold night air hit his face, sharp and real, and only then did he stop. The city outside was alive, cars passing, lights flashing, people laughing somewhere in the distance. But everything felt muted, like he was watching the world through thick glass. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Jungkook. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned against the marble wall beside the entrance, staring down at his hands. They were trembling slightly, and he hated that. He hated how easily Jungkook still affected him, how one blurred name on a piece of paper had managed to dismantle years of carefully built emotional control. A few seconds later, the hotel doors opened again. Taehyung. Jungkook's voice echoed a little too loudly in the open space. Taehyung turned around slowly. You followed me. You left. We weren't done talking because you said nothing. Jungkook stopped a few steps away, running a hand through his hair. That's not fair. That's not a conversation, Taehyung replied, his voice calm but tight. That's a deflection. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Cars passed behind Jungkook, headlights cutting through the dark. Somewhere above them, a helicopter hummed across the skyline. Jungkook exhaled. It's not about hiding her from you, it's about timing. Timing for what? There are people involved, people who could get hurt. Taehyung's eyes narrowed slightly, like me. Jungkook hesitated. And that hesitation said everything. So you were just going to let me find out from a blurred name on a folder? Taehyung asked quietly. That's how much I matter now. Jungkook's jaw tightened. You're twisting this. No, I'm finally seeing it clearly. Jungkook's voice dropped. Not everything in my life revolves around you. The words hit harder than Taehyung expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Taehyung took a small step back, as if the distance might help him breathe. That's not what I meant, Jungkook added quickly. I didn't mean. You did, Taehyung interrupted, his tone strangely steady. And it's okay. Just don't pretend this is about privacy when it's really about distance. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Jungkook said, she asked me not to tell anyone yet, not even you. Taehyung nodded slowly. So you're choosing her over me? It's not a choice, Jungkook replied. It feels like one. Jungkook stepped closer. You're my best friend, I never wanted to hurt you. Taehyung looked at him, eyes glistening now. Then why does this hurt so much? The elevator behind them chimed softly, doors opening and closing for no one. Jungkook glanced at it, then back at Taehyung. Do you want the truth? I deserve the truth. Jungkook took a breath. The wedding wasn't supposed to be announced yet. Someone leaked the draft. That's why I blurred her name to protect her. Taehyung processed the word slowly. So you were forced into silence. In a way. She's from a family that hates attention. Very traditional. They asked for privacy until everything's final. Taehyung let out a bitter breath. You could have told me privately. You could have just whispered her name. Jungkook looked down. I didn't know how you'd react. You mean you didn't want to deal with how I'd feel? Jungkook opened his mouth, then closed it again. I didn't want to lose what we had. That confession stopped Taehyung completely. Lose what we had. You've been distant too, Taehyung said softly, ever since you came back from Paris. Jungkook froze. Because I came back hoping something might still be here. The words slipped out before Taehyung could stop them. Jungkook stared at him. What? Taehyung bit the inside of his cheek. Nothing, forget it. No, Jungkook said quickly, say it. Taehyung turned away. It doesn't matter, you've moved on. You can't drop something like that and walk away, Jungkook said, voice tight. I already walked away once today, Taehyung replied. And I'm still trying to figure out why it feels like I lost something I was never allowed to name. Jungkook looked at him like he wanted to say everything and nothing at the same time. Do you want me to say her name? He finally asked. Would that fix this? No, Taehyung said honestly, but it would make it real. Jungkook took a breath. Her name is Hana. The name hung in the air between them. Hana, Taehyung repeated quietly. We met last year at a foundation gala. She works in international development. She's calm, kind, she grounds me. Taehyung swallowed, and I do. Jungkook's eyes flickered. It's not about comparison. You've always challenged me, Jungkook continued. Inspired me, but Hana gives me peace. Peace. The word landed like a verdict. Taehyung nodded slowly. Congratulations. Jungkook looked uncertain. Do you mean that? I do, Taehyung said, forcing a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. I just wish I hadn't learned her name from a blur. They stood there in silence, both aware something irreversible had shifted. Will you come to the wedding? Jungkook asked softly. Taehyung paused. Ask me again when her name isn't a secret anymore. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Jungkook standing alone under the city lights, holding a truth that had arrived far too late. Jungkook didn't move for a long time after Taehyung disappeared into the crowd. The city swallowed him whole, neon lights, passing cars, strangers brushing past without a second glance. But the space Taehyung had left behind felt louder than everything around him. For the first time that night, Jungkook realized something simple and terrifying. Taehyung hadn't walked away to be dramatic. He had walked away to survive. Days passed. No messages. No calls. Not even a read receipt on their last thread. Jungkook scrolled through their chat late at night, thumb hovering over the keyboard, typing and deleting the same sentence over and over. Are you okay? I'm sorry. Can we talk? None of them felt like enough. He stopped at a photo Taehyung had sent months ago. A candid shot backstage, both of them laughing, sweaty and exhausted after rehearsal, Taehyung leaning into him without even realizing it. Back then it had felt natural, easy. Now it felt like something fragile he had already broken. The rain started the night Jungkook finally gave up waiting. It wasn't dramatic rain, just a steady drizzle that blurred the city lights and soaked through his coat as he walked into Taehyung's studio without texting first. Taehyung stood in front of the mirror, earbuds in, practicing choreography alone. His movements were sharp, controlled, almost aggressive, as if he was trying to burn something out of his body. Jungkook waited. When their eyes finally met through the mirror, Taehyung froze. He slowly pulled one earbud out but didn't turn around. You shouldn't be here, Taehyung said calmly. But his reflection betrayed him. His shoulders had stiffened, His jaw was tight. "I know," Jungkook replied, "but I couldn't let us end like that." "End?" Taehyung repeated, finally turning around. "I wasn't aware we'd begun something worth ending." Jungkook flinched. "Don't do that." "Do what?" Taehyung asked. "Act like I'm rewriting history. You're the one who blurred me out of your life." "That's not fair. Neither is being treated like a stranger when all I ever did was stay." The words hung heavy between them. "You're getting married, Jungkook," Taehyung continued, voice rising slightly. "How exactly am I supposed to stay and pretend I don't care? It doesn't erase what we've shared." "But it rewrites it," Taehyung snapped. "You can't build a future with someone else and keep me in the footnotes." Jungkook looked down. "I never asked you to stay the same." "No," Taehyung stepped closer. "You asked me to act like none of this matters." Rain streaked down the studio windows behind them, blurring the city into abstract light. "You're upset because I'm marrying someone else," Jungkook said slowly. "But we never had a name for what we were." "We didn't need one," Taehyung replied, his voice trembling. "We had something, and you know it." Jungkook closed his eyes briefly. "I didn't know how to carry it anymore. It got too heavy." "Then you should have said that," Taehyung whispered. "Not hide behind a wedding and call it peace." Silence filled the studio again, but this time it was loaded. Regret. Recognition. Everything they had avoided numbing. Jungkook reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a smaller folder. Clean, minimal. "This was supposed to be yours," he said quietly, handing it to Taehyung. Taehyung hesitated before opening it. Inside was a mood board, soft color palettes, minimalist designs, notes in Jungkook's handwriting. On the first page, a sentence. "I wanted you to make it beautiful, because it will never feel complete if you're not part of it." Taehyung stared at the page, his chest tightening. "You were going to ask me to help plan your wedding." "I was," Jungkook admitted. "I just didn't know how to ask without making it worse." Taehyung looked up, eyes glassy. "You're still making it worse." Jungkook nodded. "I know, so what do you want now?" "I don't know how to be part of this without breaking," Taehyung said honestly. "Then let's break carefully," Jungkook replied, "and rebuild something better." The words felt fragile, not a solution, just a promise. Later that night, Taehyung stood alone on the rooftop garden, arms folded against the cold wind. The folder rested beside him on the bench, untouched. Every time he looked at it, it felt heavier. Behind him, the door creaked open. "You didn't answer my messages," Jungkook said quietly. "You sent 3. I sent them anyway." Taehyung didn't turn around. "You think showing me a mood board is going to reset everything?" "No," Jungkook said, "but it's a start." "A start to what?" Taehyung finally faced him. "Me helping you marry someone else." Jungkook stepped closer. "I want you there, not as a colleague, as someone who mattered to me." "Mattered," Taehyung echoed, past tense. "No, I didn't mean." "That's the problem. You never think about what your words sound like to me." They sat down on the bench, close but not touching, leaving space between them like a wound. "I never expected it to feel like this," Jungkook admitted. "Like what?" "Like every step I take toward the future pulls me further away from you." Taehyung let out a bitter laugh. "And yet you're still doing it." "Because I care about her," Jungkook said. "She's calm, structured, everything I thought I needed." "You said that like a checklist," Taehyung replied. "What about what you feel?" Jungkook was quiet for a long moment. "What I feel with you has never been easy," he said. "It's loud, intense, chaotic. Maybe I was scared of that." "You weren't scared," Taehyung said softly. "You were alive." The words settled between them. Then Jungkook looked up, eyes searching. "Do you want me to call it off?" Taehyung's breath caught. "What? If I said I'd walk away from everything right now, would that fix this?" "Don't put that on me," Taehyung said quickly, standing up. You're asking me to hold your future like it's my decision. But it's our future too, Jungkook replied. Taehyung turned back, eyes burning. You're not choosing between two people. You're choosing between comfort and truth. Jungkook swallowed. And which one are you? Taehyung's voice dropped to a whisper. You already know. Jungkook reached out instinctively, but his hand stopped inches from Taehyung's arm. No contact. Just air. Just everything unsaid. Do you still love me? Jungkook asked quietly. The question felt dangerous, not because Taehyung didn't know the answer, but because he did. Taehyung hesitated, just long enough for Jungkook to start pulling back. I never stopped, Taehyung said. The words landed between them with the weight of years, not comforting, not healing, just honest. Jungkook exhaled slowly, his voice barely steady. Then what happens now? Taehyung stepped back, creating distance again. Now you decide what kind of man you want to be. Not for me, not for her, for yourself. Jungkook looked at him, eyes glassy. And if I choose her? Taehyung swallowed. Then I'll design the most beautiful wedding I can. I'll smile, I'll show up. But you'll never have to wonder what could have been, because I'm telling you now. Jungkook nodded slowly, pain flickering behind his eyes. And if I do? Taehyung didn't smile. Then I'll be waiting, not forever, just long enough for you to be brave. They stood there under the dim rooftop lights. The city stretched beneath them, both knowing this wasn't resolution. It was a line, and one of them would eventually have to cross it. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the wide windows of the event planning studio, where Taehyung had reluctantly agreed to meet Hana. He stood alone at the central table, rearranging fabric swatches and calligraphy samples, more to keep his hands busy than because anything actually needed adjusting. The silence in the room was thick. This wasn't just a business meeting. It was a confrontation. Jungkook had texted him late the night before. She wants to meet you. She wants to thank you. Taehyung knew better. This wasn't about gratitude. It was about reality. The door opened softly. Hana stepped inside with a quiet, graceful presence, cream blouse, beige coat, calm eyes that didn't flinch when they met Taehyung's. Taehyung, she said with a small bow, thank you for meeting me. Taehyung returned it politely. Of course, this wedding should reflect your vision. I'm here to help. Hana smiled gently, then sat across from him. I know this must feel strange. It does, Taehyung replied honestly, but I'm used to strange where Jungkook is involved. Her smile softened, but there was something sad behind it. He speaks about you often, with admiration. Taehyung nodded slowly. We've been through a lot. That's why I wanted to meet you, Hana said. Not just for the wedding, but to understand. Understand what? Whether you're part of his past or his future. The words were calm, direct, not cruel. Taehyung inhaled slowly. That's not my decision to make. But your presence influences it, Hana said quietly. I can feel it, so can he. The silence between them grew roots. Do you love him? Taehyung asked. Hana didn't hesitate. I care for him deeply. I believe in the life we're building. And if that life is built on unresolved feelings. Hana looked down briefly. Then I want them resolved now. I'm not here to compete. I'm here to ask, will you step back? The honesty stung more than any insult. Taehyung's throat tightened. What if I said I could? Then I'd ask if you're willing to risk breaking something he's trying to make whole. Taehyung looked at the bouquet samples. He almost walked away from this for me. I know, Hana said softly, but he didn't. That silence was louder than anything else. I want him to be happy, Taehyung said finally, even if it's not with me. Hana's voice was gentle. Then help me give him that, not as a rival, as someone who knows him best. Taehyung studied her for a long moment, then slowly reached for a design template. Let's start with the aisle. He always wanted something that felt like a dream. Hana smiled faintly, thank you. But as they worked, something cracked quietly inside Taehyung. Duty and desire. Loyalty and loss. Later that evening, Jungkook arrived at the studio just as Taehyung was packing up. She told me, Jungkook said. Taehyung didn't look up. Of course she did. You didn't have to do that. Didn't I? Taehyung replied calmly. You asked me to help. But not like this, Jungkook said. Not by giving her reassurance you don't owe her. Then stop looking for someone to blame for choices you already made. Jungkook stepped closer. You think this is easy for me? You're the one hovering between us, Taehyung said. One of us has to let go first. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing? Jungkook's voice dropped. I thought if I kept you close, I wouldn't have to lose anything. Taehyung's eyes shimmered. But you can't have both, not like this. Then tell me what to do, Jungkook whispered. I've told you everything except how I feel. Taehyung met his gaze. Then say it and mean it. Jungkook swallowed hard. I never stopped loving you. I just didn't know how to love you without losing myself. And now I realize I lost myself anyway. The words shattered the last wall Taehyung had built. He closed his eyes. You have until the rehearsal dinner. After that, I'm your designer, not your what-if. And with that, he walked past Jungkook, leaving him alone in the dim studio, surrounded by fragments of a love too real to ignore and too fragile to survive without a choice. The rehearsal dinner was held at a private rooftop restaurant overlooking the river, the kind of place where the city lights reflected off glass walls and everything felt suspended between reality and fantasy. Taehyung arrived early, not because he wanted to, but because he needed time to prepare himself. He stood near the edge of the terrace, watching the water move slowly below, letting the noise of arriving guests blur into background sound. Laughter, champagne glasses clinking, soft music playing from hidden speakers. All of it felt wrong. This wasn't just a wedding event. It was the deadline he had given Jungkook. Across the terrace, Hana was greeting guests with practiced elegance. She looked calm, radiant even, as if nothing inside her was shaking. Taehyung wondered briefly if that kind of certainty was something people were born with, or something they learned after giving up on impossible love. Hey! Jungkook's voice behind him made his shoulders tense immediately. He didn't turn around. You're late, Taehyung said. I needed to think. Taehyung finally faced him. So did I, that's why I came early. They stood side by side, looking out at the river. No touching. No smiling. Just two people standing at the edge of a future that only one of them was ready to enter. Have you decided? Taehyung asked quietly. Jungkook didn't answer right away. I keep replaying everything, Jungkook said. Every moment where I almost said something. Every time you waited for me without realizing it. Taehyung nodded. That's memory, not decision. Jungkook let out a breath. I'm scared. Of what? Of choosing wrong. Taehyung's voice was gentle. You already are. You're just scared to admit which choice that is. Jungkook turned to him. If I walk away from her tonight, I lose stability. I lose the life everyone expects me to have. And if you don't, Taehyung replied, you lose yourself. The words weren't dramatic, they were simply true. Music shifted in the background as the guests were invited to sit. This was it. The line. Jungkook looked across the terrace at Hana, laughing with her parents. She deserves someone who chooses her without hesitation, he said softly. Taehyung's throat tightened, so do you. Jungkook swallowed hard. I can't do this to her, he whispered. Taehyung nodded slowly. Then don't do it to me either. Jungkook's eyes flickered. So that's it. That's honesty, Taehyung replied. Not ultimatum, not pressure, just truth. For a moment, Jungkook looked like he might say something more. Then Hana called his name. He turned and walked away. Taehyung stayed where he was, watching Jungkook take his seat at the head table, watching the world continue exactly as it was supposed to. Without him, the dinner blurred together after that. Speeches, laughter, applause. Taehyung smiled when expected, nodded when spoken to, lifted his glass when everyone else did. But inside, something quiet finally broke. Not in a dramatic way. In a tired way. Later that night, long after the guests had left, Taehyung returned to his studio alone. He didn't turn on the lights. He just sat on the floor, back against the wall, the wedding folder resting in his lap. The blurred name stared back at him again. The same space that once held possibility now held nothing. He laughed softly, then covered his face with his hands. For the first time since everything began, Taehyung cried. Not because Jungkook chose someone else, but because Jungkook had chosen comfort over truth. And Taehyung had finally chosen himself. The next morning, Jungkook woke up to a single message. From Taehyung. I've finished the designs, everything is ready. I won't be attending the ceremony. This is my goodbye. Jungkook stared at the screen, heart pounding. He called. No answer. He drove to the studio. Empty. No lights. No music. No Taehyung. Only the completed wedding layouts on the table, flawless and cold. For the first time, Jungkook understood the cost of hesitation. Not losing a wedding, but losing the one person who had loved him without conditions. And somewhere across the city, Taehyung boarded a late-night flight with nothing but a carry-on bag and a future that, for the first time, belonged entirely to him. The airport lights were too bright for how empty Taehyung felt. He sat by the window with his carry-on between his feet, watching planes taxi across the runway like distant thoughts he no longer tried to follow. His phone buzzed again. Jungkook. Another missed call. Taehyung didn't turn the screen over. He already knew what Jungkook would say, or at least he knew what Jungkook would try to say. Too late. I should have chosen differently. Don't go. But some sentences only matter when they're spoken at the right time. After that, they become echoes. The announcement for boarding came softly over the speakers. Taehyung stood up, slung his bag over his shoulder, and walked toward the gate without looking back. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for someone to follow him. Jungkook arrived at the airport 20 minutes after the plane had already taken off. He stood in the middle of the terminal, breath uneven, scanning faces that were no longer there. Business travelers, families, couples holding hands. No Taehyung. He leaned against a pillar, chest tight, as the reality finally landed. Taehyung hadn't left to make a point. He had left because staying had hurt too much. Jungkook slid down slowly until he was sitting on the floor, ignoring the stares of strangers. His phone was still in his hand, open on Taehyung's last message. This is my goodbye. Not see you later. Not we'll talk. Goodbye meant final. The wedding was in 3 days. And for the first time since he had proposed, Jungkook felt absolutely nothing when he thought about it. No excitement. No nerves. Just emptiness. Hana noticed immediately. You're not here, she said quietly that evening as they sat across from each other in her apartment. Jungkook stared at the untouched tea in front of him. I think I lost him. Hana didn't ask who. She already knew. You didn't lose him, she said gently. You let him go. Jungkook looked up, eyes red. What's the difference? Losing is accidental, Hana replied. Letting go is a choice. The words hurt because they were true. Jungkook swallowed. I thought choosing you was the right thing. Hana was silent for a long moment. Was it? She asked. Jungkook didn't answer. That was answer enough. She exhaled slowly, not angry, not dramatic, just tired. I deserve someone who looks at me the way you look at him, she said softly. And you deserve someone who feels like home, not safety. Jungkook's breath caught. Hana. She smiled sadly. I don't want to be the woman you married because you were afraid to choose love. The wedding was canceled the next morning. No scandal. No public explanation. Just a quiet statement about mutual respect and different paths. But inside Jungkook, everything collapsed. Weeks passed. Taehyung didn't post. Didn't answer messages. Didn't appear at events. He was gone from every place Jungkook knew how to look. Until one night, by accident, Jungkook saw him. A small design studio in another city. A soft interview clip shared online. Taehyung standing in front of his new work, smiling gently at the camera. He looked lighter. Not happy in a loud way, but peaceful. Jungkook watched the video over and over, memorizing the way Taehyung spoke about starting over. Sometimes, Taehyung said in the clip, you don't leave because you stop loving someone. You leave because you finally start loving yourself. Jungkook closed his eyes. That was it. That was the truth he had avoided. Months later, Jungkook stood outside the same studio. Not because he expected anything, but because some endings deserve to be acknowledged, even if they couldn't be rewritten. Taehyung opened the door himself. They stared at each other in silence. No shock. No anger. Just history standing face to face. You came, Taehyung said quietly. I didn't know where else to go, Jungkook replied. Taehyung stepped aside, then come in. The studio was warm, full of light, plants by the windows, sketches on the walls, a completely different world from the one they had shared before. You look different, Jungkook said. So do you, Taehyung replied. They stood awkwardly in the middle of the room, neither sure where to place their hands, their words, their past. I called off the wedding, Jungkook said. Taehyung nodded slowly. I know. I chose too late. Yes, Taehyung said honestly. The word didn't cut anymore. It just existed. I'm not here to ask you to come back, Jungkook said. I'm here to tell you I finally understand. Understand what? That love isn't about who stays the longest. It's about who you choose when it's hardest. Taehyung looked at him for a long moment. And what do you want now? He asked. Jungkook smiled faintly. Nothing from you, just I hope you're happy. Taehyung returned the smile. I am, he said softly. For the first time I really am. They didn't hug. They didn't confess. They didn't promise anything. Because this wasn't a reunion. It was closure. And sometimes, the most painful love stories don't end with people finding each other again. They end with both of them finally finding themselves. Before continuing any further, it is important to pause for a moment and speak to you not as a storyteller building tension, but as a narrator stepping out of the story itself. Everything you have read so far, and everything that will follow after this point, is entirely a work of fiction. It is created from imagination for narrative exploration and emotional storytelling, not as a report of real events, not as news, not as documentation, and not as a representation of the real lives, personalities, or experiences of any individuals. The names, dialogues, scenes, conflicts, emotions, relationships, and situations in this story are fictional constructs, shaped for dramatic effect and creative expression. If at any moment parts of the story feel familiar, realistic, or reminiscent of real people or real situations, that resemblance is purely coincidental and unintentional. Stories like this often feel powerful because they borrow emotional textures from real life: uncertainty, longing, regret, love, fear, hope. It is natural to ask ourselves, what if something like this truly happened? Or why does this feel so real? But that emotional realism does not make the story factual. It simply means that fiction is doing what it has always done best: reflecting human feelings through imagined circumstances. Even if certain characters appear loosely inspired by public figures, those inspirations are symbolic and abstract, not literal, not biographical, and not meant to describe, interpret, or judge any real person. The fictional versions that exist within this narrative do not represent the real individuals behind the names, and should never be treated as such. Because of that, this story should never be shared, quoted, or reframed as information, evidence, rumor, or hidden truth. It is not meant to support speculation, gossip, or assumptions about anyone's private life. It is not a lens for analyzing real people, and it is not a substitute for reality. Fiction becomes harmful when it is mistaken for fact, when imagination is treated as proof, or when narratives are used to justify judgment, harassment, or misinformation. Reading responsibly means allowing a story to remain what it is: a story, not a claim about the world. In an age where viral content moves quickly and emotional narratives are often mistaken for reality, it becomes even more important to remain critical, reflective, and ethical as readers. Ask not whether this could be real, but why this kind of story feels meaningful to you. Is it the emotional conflict, the human vulnerability, the universal fear of losing something important? These questions help us understand ourselves, not other people. Fiction is a mirror for feelings, not a window into someone else's life. This narrative exists for entertainment, emotional exploration, and creative expression. It is not designed to harm, attack, expose, or define anyone. It does not carry hidden messages about real individuals, nor does it seek to influence how you perceive them. It simply offers a space to experience a story, to feel something, and then to return to reality with clearer boundaries between imagination and truth. With that understanding in mind, you are invited to continue reading the story not as observers of real lives, but as readers entering a fictional world, where emotions are real but the events are not, where characters exist only within narrative, and where the meaning lies not in what is true, but in what is felt, reflected upon, and then gently left behind as the story moves forward.